Today, we are launching a major project to get closer to the truth, to learn the true nature of anomalous phenomena. Perhaps we will even be able to understand how our world really works.
To grasp what's really happening, we need to gather statistics, identify recurring events, and analyze what all these anomalous occurrences have in common. That's how we'll uncover what's invisible and previously unknown to us. I've started mapping out paranormal events in an effort to catalog them. In this episode, we're examining glitches in the matrix, specifically the disappearance and reappearance of objects. Here are a few cases I've managed to collect.
We've been going through forum posts and archived discussions, and this is what people are reporting. For years, I've dealt with the disappearing object phenomenon, but lately items have started appearing or reappearing as well. Just this morning, for example, I woke up and went in my kitchen to make coffee, and a random pack of paper coffee cups was sitting in the middle of my kitchen counter. No one else lives here or has access to my house, and I always set an alarm at night so I would hear it if someone tried to get in. I literally have no clue where this pack of coffee cups came from. It just appeared out of thin air. I'm grateful in a way because it was sure convenient to have coffee cups this morning, but still, who put them there? I even checked my Amazon history to see if somehow I bought these without remembering, but no such purchase was there. I've had other objects randomly appear in my bathroom too. Lip glosses that aren't in a color I would buy have appeared on my sink in the bathroom. I've had strange food items I didn't buy appear in my pantry. 2-boxed soups, ketchup I don't even like it, mustard don't use it much, and a random bottle of soy sauce. I don't even know what to think about this.
Yesterday, after cleaning the right side of my car, I threw a coin on the passenger door, closed the door, moved around the car through the back to the driver's side, opened the door, and the coin was on the driver's door. It was a coin from Switzerland, and I only had one.
Batteries always go missing out of any remote control in the house. Even placed all the remotes on the kitchen counter one night, the batteries always go missing when we are asleep. I recorded all 5 of the remotes being pushed off the counter by something invisible, and every last battery falls out of the remotes as they fall on the floor. It woke me and my husband up. We picked up and found all but 2 batteries. 2 days later, I find them on my dresser in my bedroom. My entity likes batteries, so we decided to keep a basket of batteries out for them, my entity. No more missing batteries from the remote controls. Also, I said out loud to my invisible friend that the basket was strictly for them. I do recycle the batteries in the basket every couple months. Still have light experiences in my house, but nothing major or scary. For the past few months, I've experienced a series of unusual events in my house, involving objects disappearing and then reappearing in places I had already checked thoroughly. These incidents weren't things I could have overlooked. Some of the objects were large, in small spaces, or placed in spots where it was impossible to miss them. The most recent and most extreme incident involved my old phone. My boyfriend and I both saw it on my dad's office desk the day before, and we each tried to unlock it, to which we both failed at different times. For this reason, I left the phone face down on the desk, and my boyfriend never went back into the room after me. We were the only ones home. When we left the house, I believed the phone was still there, where I had left it. But unlike the other objects that reappeared somewhere inside the house, the phone showed up in a completely different location altogether. The next day, my boyfriend found that same phone wedged between the seat and the passenger door in his locked car. My family had come home the previous night, but they never interacted with my boyfriend or got near his car, and he never left his car when he dropped me off a few hours later. The doorbell camera also showed us leaving without anything in our hands, and there was no opportunity for anyone else to access his car. Given all the details, the phone could not have physically ended up there through normal means.
I had a large phone charger go missing from my car. I emptied the vehicle out and it was not there. 2 days later, my friend found it, said I left it at his apartment a few days prior and gave it to me. It doesn't have this type of charger and it has pretty unmistakable identifying marks on it, so it had to be mine. Later that night, I found my charger in my car. I now have 2 of these chargers and cannot explain why. They both have the identifying marks, and I have never known anyone else in my life to own this charger. So weird.
I had never experienced anything strange until I moved in with my boyfriend and his family when I was 20. The house from the start gave me super uneasy vibes. Nothing like I had ever felt before. I always felt like I was being watched there. Oftentimes, I would get off of work and sit in the driveway for hours waiting for someone else to get home. I'd done anything in my power to avoid going inside alone. Over the course of the next 2 years I lived there, I would occasionally experience some unexplainable things that would later prove my initial uneasy intuition. The disappearing objects was one of those things and happened almost frequently. It started out slow and subtle, harmless acts of moving things a few feet away from where we thought we placed them. Car keys or a pocket knife would move from the coffee table to the kitchen counter, honestly making us believe that maybe we did just misplaced it. But then it advanced, almost turning into a sort of hide-and-seek-like game that happened almost daily. Whatever it was seemed to pick on my boyfriend's mom the most often. She would lay her clothes out for work the night before, only to wake up the following morning and not be able to find them. Later coming home from work to find the clothing neatly draped across the bed in obvious view. Noted that she was the last to leave the house of a morning and the first to get home in the afternoon, so definitely no chance it was anyone pranking with her. Then whatever it was advanced further. Her prescription medication would go missing despite always and only being kept in the designated cabinet. Once again, she would come home from work and find the pill bottles placed in the middle of the kitchen floor, arranged neatly upside down on their tops. It was like a never-ending sick game or joke that just continued to get worse and worse. It was exhausting and really began to weigh on everyone's mental health. My boyfriend and I would start sleeping with anything of importance, always keeping things we could not afford to lose on our person at all times, hoping that would prevent it from disappearing. Up until this point, I never seemed to be the target. I watched from the sidelines as it picked through the family, but never me, until eventually it did. At the time, I had just accepted a new job out of town and the commute was brutal. To make matters worse, I was driving back roads during a snowy Kentucky winter in a 2WD Chevy Cobalt. I needed all the extra time I could get, but somehow I happened to oversleep that morning. I remember hopping out of bed and running to the bathroom to get ready, cell phone in hand as I'm frantically texting coworkers letting them know I would be late but not to worry. At some point I sat my phone down. I rushed to the bedroom to tell my sleepy boyfriend goodbye and scurried out the door to my car. Before leaving the driveway, I realized that my cell phone was missing. Aggravated, but knowing the road conditions were way too bad to not take it, I hurried back inside to grab it. Retracing my steps, I searched everywhere I had been that morning. Couldn't find it anywhere. Eventually waking my boyfriend because I was coming absolutely unglued at this point. I just did not have the time to play games. He sprung up to help, stripping the blankets and pillows off the bed and into the floor in case I might have left it when telling him goodbye. Nothing. We migrated down the hall, to the bathroom and eventually to the living room where every couch cushion was ripped off and thrown to the floor. Nothing. I was absolutely defeated as these were the only rooms I had been in. Where could it be? We even went outside and rummaged through my car, checking between the seats in case there was a chance it had fallen out of my pocket. Again, nothing. Exhausted and annoyed, we came back inside and sat down in the living room. At this point, the only thing left to do was try to call it and pray we could hear a vibration sound. My boyfriend places his phone on speaker and dials the number. It rings maybe 3 times before making a clicking sound, almost like someone had answered. Silence. My boyfriend says, "Oh, hello?" My blood runs cold as a loud gasp-like breathing sound was heard from the other end, followed by continuous random clicking of buttons that just would not stop. He quickly hangs up the phone and we just stare at each other for what felt like forever. That's it. I had just decided to call into work. I'm so done with this, I'm extremely overwhelmed and I'm going to be beyond late at this point. We decided just to go back to bed instead and try again later. We walked down the hall and into the bedroom to find, guess what, my phone laying perfectly centered on the bed in obvious view. My experience definitely traumatized me, even still to this day. Thankfully, once I moved out of the house, I never experienced anything else like it again. Knock on wood, of course.
So this is a little background story. I have a friend who is always telling me he has this backpack where he will put items in, and then when he goes back to get them, they are gone. Later, they randomly appear in the same spot he checked before. At first, I definitely doubted it, as he told me multiple times that this had happened with different objects. But then, last night when we were both completely sober, he was showing me some music he was making on his computer. He paused it because he was about to leave. He had work at a radio station, and he went to look in his backpack for his dongle so he could use the aux at the radio station. That's when he started frantically tearing through his backpack, saying he swore he had put the dongle in the front zipper pocket. He went outside to check his truck, and while he was doing that, I looked into the front pocket just to double check for him, and it wasn't in there. This is where it gets weird. As soon as he walked back into my house, the song he had made on his computer just randomly started playing. We looked at each other in confusion, and I asked him if he had somehow clicked play. He said, "No bro, you just saw me walk in." Then we both looked at the backpack, and he said, "I bet you anything I'll find my dongle right in that front pocket right now." He literally opened the front pocket and pulled it right out. We had both soberly seen that it wasn't in there just minutes before. It was very strange, but also amazing. I got chills immediately when he pulled it out.
I moved into a house not too long ago. It's pretty old, and I swear there's something weird, psychic, and paranormal about it. There have been so many times where I'll put things somewhere and they'll disappear for weeks, and then I'll randomly find them in a completely different spot. I know it's not anyone borrowing them because it's happened to other people in my family too. And I'm definitely sure I didn't just misplace them. For example, while we were moving into our house, I locked my jewelry box to keep my jewelry safe. I put the key in my purse, and my brother even saw me do it. For weeks, I couldn't find the key, and finally I just told my dad to crack it open. When he did, my key was sitting perfectly in one of the drawers inside my jewelry box. Another example, I lost my makeup brush for weeks at my dad's house, and when I went back to my mom's house, I found it there, which I thought was really strange. Another time, my friend's charger block went missing. When she left, I gave her mine. Weeks later, when I came back to my dad's house from my mom's, I lifted up my pillow and it just rolled out from underneath it. I literally made my bed before I left, so I know it wasn't under there. Also, ever since we moved into that house, I've never been able to sleep the same. I toss and turn all night and can never get deep sleep. The bathroom light flickers a lot and sometimes doesn't work. I don't know if that's just the light going out or what. Sometimes I feel like I'm being watched and I've heard a lot of weird noises. But that's basically it. It doesn't seem like my house is haunted, it's just a very strange place.
I had an orange piece of paper I brought home from college. I don't recall what it was, but I remember it being something I didn't want to misplace. I set it down on a table in my room, turned away from it for a few seconds, and turned back, and it was gone. I searched my room up and down, but nothing. My room was on the second floor, and nobody else lived upstairs. I know I was alone because our stairs made it impossible to sneak up. It eventually showed back up in my room, out in the open on top of my dresser about a year later. I had cleaned and reorganized that room multiple times in that time, so I can't fathom how I'd have missed it, nor can I imagine anyone committing to pranking me like that. I can't know it was supernatural, but I never felt alone in that room, or upstairs in general. I lived up there for 10 years and always felt uneasy, like I always had to be ready for a sudden intrusion. People who lived up there after me have said they felt similar, some saying they believed it was haunted. I felt so validated hearing that, especially since they said all that without me prompting them or telling them about my experiences.
As a kid, it used to happen to us in our old house. We even had a 10-foot ladder go missing from the garage once and reappeared in our basement where we had winding stairs and no windows wide enough for it to fit through if someone had stolen it and tried to return it. To this day, my parents have no clue who moved it there or how it got there. We had other frequent encounters with spirit in that house, but eventually moved. Car keys would go missing and reappear in odd places, along with other items, things sliding off countertops onto the floor, footsteps upstairs when we were all in the family room. Recently, I was looking for a large metal button pressing tool along with a box of colorful buttons that I keep in its own drawer. I was home alone and looked in the drawer multiple times because that's where I keep it. Checked every other compartment and drawer of that room to make sure I didn't misplace it, and checked the original drawer at least 5 times. Went back and there they were in the drawer, but how could I miss a metal tool and a box of bright, colorful buttons when they're the only thing in the drawer? We call it the void. Sometimes the void returns our items, sometimes not. My husband was sweeping the garage. He stepped away for a moment and came back with the dustpan, but the broom was gone. We never saw it again. A huge fish tank with 10 fish. Thought the large angelfish simply wasn't there one day. Was he eaten? Nope. We emptied the entire tank. No bones. He was just gone. We searched the entire house, even though there was no reason for it to be out of his pocket in the house. So eventually, he resigned himself to the fact that he must have left it on his desk, and someone had lifted it. A couple of months later, as we lay together in the darkness on the sofa watching TV, something was mentioned on the program about the elves and the shoemaker story, which started off a convo between us, as we both remembered it from our childhood. Jokingly, I said, "I bet it was the little elves that took your pen," and we laughed it off. About an hour later, we heard a faint noise, like something rolling under the sofa. Thinking it was maybe a mouse or something, we put the light on, and he had a look to see what it was. Our sofa was the type with feet. It was his pen! To say we were amazed was putting it lightly. I think we were so stunned that we just turned the TV off and went to bed in silence. I still don't know to this day how it got there. We looked everywhere for it. The house had wooden floors, and so it couldn't have been buried in the pile of carpet. Still baffling even now.
In our family, things are constantly disappearing and reappearing in strange ways. We like to think it's our oldest child who passed away some time ago. Whenever things turn up missing, we just say, "Okay, Matthew, we really need that back now." Then we leave the room and come back, and whatever it is that was missing will be sitting in plain sight.
I lost my phone in the house one day a number of years ago. I looked all over. Nothing. I called it from my landline. Nothing. Pinged it from Find My Phone on my computer. Nothing. After looking for another 20 minutes or so, I said to the house, "Please give me back my phone." At that very second, it pinged. It was in the laundry room under a couple of clothes in the hamper. I hadn't been in the laundry room. Just the other night, I was reading in bed and got up to get some water. When I got back to bed, I couldn't find my glasses. I checked under the pillows, shook out the sheets and blanket, and checked the kitchen. Nothing. Finally, I said, "Please give me back my glasses." Right then, I heard a light clinking sound, and there were my glasses on the blanket. Coincidences? Maybe, but pretty odd. This has started happening to me a bunch in the last year, where I've stopped worrying about the things I lose because they tend to turn up a few days later. It started when I'd gone on a trip somewhere and lost one earring of a pair in a hotel. We had 3 rooms, and I scoured all 3, including my own bag and everyone else's, looking for this earring. I gave up after that and just resigned to the fact that I was never gonna see it again. So I opened a drawer in my apartment one day, and this earring was sitting right there, front and center, when I know I lost it hundreds of miles away and never brought it back home. Also, I dug the other earring of the pair out of my bag just to make sure it was actually a complete pair again, and there were 2.
This just happened to me right now. I was frantically looking for my battery from my dab pen, and then it magically reappeared on my dresser after I had been looking for it for 20 minutes. I looked out the window not even for 5 seconds, and I turned back and saw it next to my car keys. I immediately got chills down my spine. We've chosen a scientific approach to this investigation. Otherwise, we'll never catch anything real. We're working strictly with empirical data, YouTube comments, Reddit threads, historical and archival records, eyewitness testimony, even medical reports. I've already started building a working framework, and here's what I've noticed. At the core of many anomalous phenomena, a few fundamental elements keep repeating: telepathy, ball lightning, the disappearance and reappearance of objects. These patterns show up again and again across different cultures, time periods, and types of paranormal reports. But we'll get to our conclusions at the end of the episode. For right now, we need to look at the data.
Something unexplainable happened to me. At the time, I was living alone, and none of my family members had keys to my apartment. I had a special poster hanging on my wall, and one day I woke up to find it completely missing. It hadn't fallen. All of the thumbtacks were still in place, exactly where they had been, still pinned into the wall. There was no sign that it had been pulled down or tampered with. 7 months later, I woke up one morning and found the poster lying face down on my living room floor. When I picked it up, I saw that none of the thumbtack holes were damaged or torn, as if it had never been ripped down at all. I still can't explain how that could have happened.
I've had strange occurrences happen to me on and off since I finished college, or at least that's the earliest I can remember this phenomenon happening. I would most always write it off as misplacing or losing it somewhere, somehow. All different kinds of items like chargers, files, paper, and headphones. Most recently, this happened again with my headphones. I have notoriously lost all of my headphones over the years, and chalked this last time up to me again misplacing them. Similar to others, I searched the designated area thoroughly where I knew I left them, on the top of my dresser next to my TV. Searched everywhere I could have left them, and nothing. Today I woke up and they are sitting in the most obvious spot on my dresser, exactly where I knew I left them. I sat there stunned and went through this deep thought trance, realizing that our reality is not what it seemed.
I rent a full attic, just one big room. I always put my remote in the same usual spot, same with my keys, and the same with my meds, the pill bottle. Sometimes I would go crazy looking for them and just could not find them. Then I'd go downstairs to use the bathroom or whatever, come back up, and it would be right where I originally put it. After a while, I figured it out. There's a spirit living here. So whenever something disappeared, I would yell at the spirit, "Please, you better put that back where it belongs. Thank you." And wouldn't you know it, it would be there when I came back into the room. The spirit almost even made me late for work once because my keys went missing. At the time, I had no idea what was happening. I honestly thought I was losing my mind. So I went to my roommate, who owns the house, and flat out asked him, "Did you know you have a ghost living here?" It wasn't just a gut feeling, it was more like I knew. He was facing the window, working on his computer, and I was standing behind him. He stopped, turned around, looked at me and said, "How did you know?" Like he was in shock. Turns out it's most likely a kid, a boy who likes to play. He even told me that several times the clock would fall off the wall. Then he got mad and yelled at the spirit boy to stop throwing the freaking clock. Haha, and it did stop. So whenever the spirit takes something, just yell and tell them to please put it back where it belongs. Just be nice. I used to live in an extremely haunted house. This sort of thing would happen to me all the time. My phones would also dial 911 when completely locked and stationary and made no noise whatsoever. I got in trouble with the cops. If I placed something down and turned around, sometimes it was broken when I turned back around to face it. The worst was when my cell was in my hoodie pocket in the car, but when I got to school, it wasn't there. I was without it for days. It was in the ottoman at the foot of my bed, with the sheets fully closed, which I hadn't opened in months. I tend to just wash my sheets then replace immediately, rather than cycling them out. It was still on, full ringer, never rang when I called it.
My money ring went missing this afternoon. I got out of bed wearing it, took a shower still wearing it. I headed into the closet and got dressed when I heard something fall on the floor. I looked at my hand and realized my ring was missing. I looked everywhere, couldn't find it. Went on a seaside with my girlfriend, then went back home. I sat on the couch and noticed the ring on the center table sitting on an old pile of bills. I didn't feel anything weird when it happened. Like no sensation of it being pulled off of my finger or anything.
This just happened to my husband and me. He lost his wallet last week, right before we were leaving for the airport to catch a flight. We tore the house apart looking for it in the hour we had to search. Last we knew, it was sitting on top of our TV stand, but it was gone. We searched everywhere, multiple times. It made no sense. He ended up grabbing his passport, and we left. We just got home today. That wallet was sitting on top of the TV stand, right where it should have been. The husband lost his damn mind. Something strange happened to me today. I had money in my purse, about 30 pounds, and when I got to a bus stop, my purse was empty. So me and my friend looked around where I had been in case I dropped it. On the bus later, the money was in the purse. It has one segment, it's like a mini bag. It was not hidden. Where did it go? Last night, I came home around 7 p.m. and put my crochet bag on the sofa. It was filled with 2 unfinished hats, 1 finished hat, a bunch of crochet tools, hooks, scissors, and so on, and a bunch of yarn in a Ziploc. This morning I went to finish the hats, and the bag of yarn was gone. I searched everywhere in my tiny and very well organized apartment, retraced my steps, and so on, and then lo and behold, at 6:30 p.m. tonight, after spending all day looking for it all, I found the bag of yarn in my tin foil and Ziploc drawer.
We see that the phenomenon is strictly human-oriented. It's a previously unknown form of contact, an attempt to surprise, to shatter familiar worldviews or trigger cognitive dissonance. It's also becoming clear that this phenomenon possesses supernatural abilities. While developing my map, I was able to identify certain phenomena that lie at the core of many paranormal occurrences. To understand this phenomenon, we need to base our conclusions on an analysis of all empirical data currently available to us. Such data include comments on Reddit, comments on YouTube, forum discussions, witness descriptions, archival materials, police and intelligence data, audio and video recordings, photographs, material evidence, medical evidence, hypnotic testimony and other psychological and psychiatric methods, experimental data collection methods, and physical experiments. Even at these early stages of research, it becomes clear that the phenomenon is often human-oriented and has direct contact with witnesses. In some form, it may exhibit predictive characteristics and even a kind of mind reading. However, this remains to be studied further in the future. For example, telepathy can be linked to glitches in the Matrix, UFOs, poltergeists, occult practices, and even Bigfoot. Similarly, ball lightning also underlies many paranormal phenomena, UFOs, poltergeists, Bigfoot, psychic events. This is strange and leads to some deep reflection.
First story. My boyfriend and I lost the remote. We looked everywhere, between cushions of the couch, even pulled them out. About 5 minutes later, I reached in between the cushion and it was sitting perfectly between to grab it. The other incident happened tonight. I was looking for my headphones. I checked by the side of my bed in the covers where I normally tend to leave them, and they were nowhere to be found. I had a little work I needed to get done before the weekend was over, so I grabbed my laptop from the living room, worked, then placed it on the floor near my head. I turned over and somehow my headphones were on top of my laptop I just used. Neither of us had found them in the interim, and I never left my spot for him to place them there without me knowing.
Now, it doesn't happen all the time. Might happen once every 3 to 4 years. Does not make any sense. I tore my car apart looking for a charger. I cleaned the whole interior, and then months later it appeared. Not under a seat. Nope. Sitting out in the open middle of the backseat carpet. There is no physical way I missed it for months.
My young son lost his Crocs shoes. Now, I know little ones lose their shoes all the time, but we looked everywhere. Everywhere. No shoes. Everyone left the house. No one was there overnight. The shoes appeared the next morning together, but placed upside down. So strange. No one knows to this day where they came from. They were on a chair. I often think I have a finder in our house. When something is lost, I ask in my head, "Can you help me find it?" One time a plastic hanger tilted downward on its own as if to point the way. Sure enough, what I was looking for was right below where it pointed.
It was a huge warehouse that shipped a variety of electronics. I was in quality control, which involved inspecting each item in an order before packaging it and sending it off to the shipping area. It was a bit of a slow night, so I went and got the items for a few orders on my own. One in particular included a couple of printer cartridges. I started going through the process of scanning and weighing them individually when one of the printer cartridges just straight up disappeared in the few seconds I wasn't looking at it. The only person who could have conceivably grabbed it was my neighboring QC person, but she was in my line of sight and had her back to me the whole time. There was no way anyone else could snatch it without me seeing them. They would have needed to walk the full length of my line and come right beside me to do it. But no matter where I looked and who I asked, it was just gone. Baffled, I went off to find the shelf that had more of those cartridges and came back to my line to finish the order. Later on in the night, I heard the distinct slapping sound of something landing directly behind me. I turned to look, and there was that damn cartridge laying on the ground. The lady on the line nearest to me had heard it too, and we both looked at it, puzzled. It looked like it had fallen straight down from the ceiling somehow. Lots of other weird things like this would happen there. Pieces of cardboard getting launched at you like frisbees from the tops of the storage shelves, other random objects dropping from the ceiling, strange high-pitched giggling sounds that not everyone could hear, the sounds of footsteps absolutely booking it down the line when everything was quiet, distinct knocking sounds if you asked if anyone was there, etc. I got used to it and would joke that we had gremlins, but it used to scare the shit out of the others all the time.
It happened again. My whole life, items have gone missing, only to reappear later in a place where the item would have absolutely been found during the initial searches. I have always joked that it was fairies who get a kick out of watching us look for things, and then laugh even harder when we find the item right in front of us. Nearly every time this happens, I ask them to please return the item, and it will reappear within a few days, if not sooner. Well, this latest missing item was my Roku remote. It was not a big deal, because I have an application for that, so it was fine for it to be missing for a little while. I did my initial search and then gave up because I did not feel like moving the bed or dealing with the hassle of continuing to search further. Fast forward 3 weeks, and I finally decided that I needed to find it. It went missing in my bed, so it had to be there, right? I stripped the bed, I had my husband help me lift the bed, we looked through the nightstands and anywhere it could have become wedged. We joked about the fairies and I said, well, I guess I need to ask for it back. Please return my remote to me, you crazy pranksters. An hour later, I was working on setting up my next art project, and I opened my craft box, and there it was, sitting right on top. This is a small 4x6-inch box, so it is not as though things can hide in there. I use it every day. It was 100% searched at the time it disappeared, and then looked through over a dozen times when I opened it every night. Those mischievous little troublemakers always put the item in the most obvious places for me. I am sure they had a good laugh. My husband was there and bore witness, which I am glad about because he might have thought I was lying otherwise. We got quite a kick out of it too. Now, if only they could return all the time I have lost looking for things.
Most people rarely think about things like this. Even though many of us have experienced something similar, we tend to dismiss it, assume we imagined it, and quickly forget about it.
We need to dig deeper into the statistics. Can it really be that so many people are experiencing cases like this?
Not too long ago, my girlfriend purchased a new phone charger. It came with the cable and the charging brick. When we got home, she plugged it into the power strip by our bed. She bought this charger specifically to keep it by her bedside, so she could keep her other charger at work. She had no plans to ever move it as we've got extra chargers in the living room. A couple days later, before going to bed, we noticed that the charging brick was nowhere to be seen. The cable portion of it was right where she left it when she unplugged her phone earlier that morning. Laying over the nightstand and partially on her pillow, the cable hadn't moved an inch. But somehow the charging brick portion was nowhere to be seen. We searched our whole room up and down. We looked in every drawer, under the bed, turned the closet inside out, and even checked the pockets of all our clothes. It was nowhere. I personally searched every inch of the bedroom and the whole apartment for that matter. A few days later, I'm in the kitchen when I hear a crashing noise from our bedroom. I go into the room and see the charging brick laying in the middle of the floor. This sort of thing happens to me every once in a while, but this incident was especially baffling. I thought about it for quite some time and could never come up with a reasonable explanation.
We call it the void. Sometimes the void returns our items, sometimes not. My husband was sweeping the garage. He stepped away for a moment and came back with the dustpan, but the broom was gone. We never saw it again. A huge fish tank with 10 fish. Thought the large angelfish simply wasn't there one day. Was he eaten? Nope. We emptied the entire tank. No bones. He was just gone. My car keys. I am OCD about putting my things in the same place all the time. I hate losing and looking for things. We turned the house and both cars inside out, no keys. 6 months later, they were in my husband's glove box, which was checked multiple times and used during that 6 months.
Once at the bathroom, a tiny screw holding my glasses fell off the frame to the floor. I could not find it. Many weeks later, I went to the bathroom, and I saw a tiny screw resting upright on the edge of the sink. I cannot explain it, because I would have cleaned and wiped the sink many times since it disappeared. I can't think of any way the screw made its way to the edge of the sink.
My boyfriend lost his flosser. It was on the coffee table within arm's reach of where he was laying down on the couch. He picked up everything on the table twice to look for it, but it was gone. Went to grab a new one from the bathroom, and while he was there, I picked up everything on the table to look at too. It was not there. He sat down, and 5 minutes later, there it was, right in plain sight, on the coffee table within arm's reach, right next to the new toothpick he had just grabbed and put down.
Well, this happened to me recently. I have a bad back. As a result, I kept a small pillow on my driver's seat so I could lean against it. Before going on vacation, I removed my iPhone holder from its usual location and placed it on my driver's seat, then concealed it with the small pillow. Came home 1 week later, checked under the pillow, but the iPhone holder was not there. For the next 2 months, I searched my car everywhere but could not find it. I live alone. No one has the key to my house or my car. This past Sunday, after I parked my car in the garage, something told me to lift the pillow on the driver's seat. I did, and there it was, my iPhone holder. There is no effing way because I looked there at least 3 times in the last 2 months. It was not there when I looked. This iPhone holder is not small. It's about 8 inches tall and 3.5 inches wide. When my dad passed away, I sometimes sensed his presence, but in recent years, I no longer felt that. Recently, I wondered and asked out loud if my dad's spirit was still around. I am an empath, and I felt that was his way of letting me know he still visits me sometime.
I pulled my dongle out of my car by accident before getting out to go get groceries, and it just vanished. I looked on the seats, in between the seat and the center console, and underneath the seats. I moved all of them and looked under the car. I looked everywhere, stone cold sober, and I wanted to cry because I had just bought it. It was already midnight, and I just wanted to go home. I slammed the car doors shut and started to walk toward the store with tears in my eyes. Then I realized I forgot to turn the light off in the car. I walked back, opened the door, and the dongle was sitting right on the seat, where I had looked 100 times. I was so baffled.
In the floorboard of the back seat of my truck are a couple storage bins where I keep my Noco 12-volt battery charge. I went to get it out one day, and it wasn't there. I checked both bins, then checked under the back seat, then checked the bins again. I moved on to the house thinking I'd misplaced it. Checked the garage, then the house. Went back to the truck and took everything out from under the seat and searched thoroughly. Still no charger. I checked both storage bins for a third time and even thought to myself, I do not even know why I am looking in these. I've already checked both of them twice. Still no charger. After thoroughly searching the truck, I more thoroughly searched the garage and house. Still no charger. I checked one more time in the truck, including checking the storage bins for a fourth time. Again, I wondered why I was even looking there because I'd already checked there 3 times already. Still no charger, even though I specifically remembered putting it in the driver's side bin on the floor. I gave up looking for it. A few days later, I went to get an oil rag out of the floorboard bin, and the charger was there right where it should have been. Right where I'd checked 4 times a few days before. The charger is a pretty big block with a power cord coming off one end and what looks like jumper cables on the other end. It's not a small thing, and it takes up most of the storage bin. There's absolutely no way it could be missed. My truck stays locked at all times, and I live in a cul-de-sac in a nice neighborhood. The only one with access to my keys is my girlfriend, and she wouldn't mess with anything in my truck. We're in our 40s, and she's not one to play pranks or jokes. We've been dating for 3 years, and she's never played a single prank on me or anyone else.
Here we are observing a certain behavioral pattern of this phenomenon. First, an object that a person clearly remembered and knew exactly where it was, and kept in mind and memory, disappeared. Moreover, we see the possibility of mental and verbal communication. Thought reading, the phenomenon responds to requests. We need to identify and separate the influence of verbal and mental communication with the phenomenon. I remember there was a case when researchers mentally asked it to knock a specific number of times, and the phenomenon did so.
Yes, let's continue. We still don't have enough data. I had Mexican food for lunch, so I saved some that I could eat later. I grabbed the trays out of the fridge and grabbed a fork so I could scoop it out onto a plate. While it was warming up in the microwave, I wiped the fork off with a napkin, and I sat the fork down on the table. Fast forward to when my food is ready and I go to eat. I look to the spot of the table I set my fork, and it's gone. I checked everywhere. I checked the sink, the dishwasher, the floor in case it dropped. I even checked the trash can. It was nowhere. I grabbed another fork and started to eat. When I finished eating, I got up to my drink in the sink and I came back to grab my plate, and both forks were there. One was on the table in the exact spot I left it, and one was on my plate. I don't understand it.
I have a trickster spirit that has been attached to me since 1993. Actually, spirits do not have a sex. I just refer to her as female, and named her Abigail when she first showed up. I got home one afternoon, sat down to watch some TV, put the remote back in the little holder, then 10 minutes later reached for the remote. It wasn't there. I decided that my dumbass has carried it in the other room. So I got up and looked for about 20 minutes, then about the third time I walked back through the living room, there it was in the holder, right where it was supposed to be. About 30 minutes later, my cigarettes disappeared, then reappeared right where it was supposed to be. Another time I found the remote under my waterbed mattress. Cooking spoons, coffee cups, plates of food, shoes, and all sorts of other stuff would disappear. Sometimes it would reappear where I left it, other times I had to do a scavenger hunt. One morning as I was getting ready to leave for work, my keys were missing, so I walked out of the room and said, "Hey, I'm late for work, I really need my keys. I'll play with you when I get home." Counting to 3, walked back in the living room and my keys were hanging up. I said thank you. She would not only mess with me and my stuff, but my friends that came over a lot would be the target of her pranks. They enjoyed it also. She has slowed down a good bit, as my wife and kids are afraid of spirits, but got used to Abigail pretty quickly. That doesn't stop them from being spooked when she does something.
This happened to me this week. 2 days ago, I parked my car, then went on my phone to respond to messages before heading into my boyfriend's apartment. I have a vape, please don't judge, I'm using it to try to quit smoking, and it was sitting on my lap while I was parking. I started to gather my things before getting out of my car, and it just completely disappeared out of thin air. I looked in my car for 15 minutes and couldn't find it anywhere. I looked everywhere in my car, between the seats, under that mats, in my pants sweater pockets. I even checked my bag 3 times while in the car, thinking I might have thrown it in there. The next day, me and my boyfriend cleaned my whole car while still looking for it. Neither of us could find it. It's not that small, and I've dropped it before in between the seats, but always found it really soon. I thought I was going crazy. I was pretty upset that it literally disappeared in thin air. This morning I go to work, and when I get out of my car in the parking lot, there it is. In the space between my seat rail and the door, a place I checked about 20 times and cleaned the day before. It was like it had just fallen there. I sent a video to my boyfriend, and he's also freaked out. I think he somewhat doubted that it was even in my car when we couldn't find it. It just reappeared from nothing. Things have disappeared and reappeared for me before, but this one was way more obvious than anything else I've experienced.
I was at work, trying to grab a pen out of my back pocket. It fell but never hit the ground. A coworker helped me look for it, but we couldn't find it. So I went back to doing whatever I was doing, and 5 minutes later I heard something drop behind me. Turn around, and my pen is laying in the middle of the floor, about a foot away from me. I have no idea where it came from. Told the coworker that helped me look for it. She was just as confused and blown away as I was. A few years ago, I lost the remote for my Apple box. I searched high and low for it. Under the couch, in the couch cushions, under blankets, basically everywhere. I had to purchase a new remote, and even got a brightly colored cover for the new one. A few weeks later, I arrived home from errands, and the old remote was sitting there in the middle of the living room floor. No one else was home, so that was quite an experience.
My husband and I always set the remote on the coffee table. Our couch is hungry and will gobble up anything offered to it. You have to reach deep in the bowels of the couch to retrieve items. So we have learned to always set things on the coffee table. Well, one day, the remote is missing. No one else would have touched it, so we're stumped. We take the couch apart and look for it. Nada. Under the couch? No. We tear up the whole living room looking for it. After a half hour, I ask out loud, "Can we please have the remote back?" I go to use the bathroom, which is in our bedroom. I have a Boo plushie from Mario. It's a ghost character. On top of the plushie is the remote.
We were living in an unfurnished apartment while another was being renovated. One day, we could not find the car keys anywhere at all. It was down to wading through the garbage room because accidentally throwing them down the chute was about the only other thing that could have happened. The car was in the garage. It was locked. They just had to be somewhere but weren't. When we went back upstairs, they were on the kitchen bench. This place was unfurnished. We had a coffee machine on the bench, and that was about it. No clutter at all. We'd searched everywhere. There's just no way they were on that kitchen bench when we were searching. It would have been impossible to have not seen them, but there they were really weird.
Yeah, Doc, this is genuinely strange. It almost feels like the phenomenon is playing with people. Could it be some kind of contact?
It does seem that way, Elisa. What we're seeing suggests that many paranormal phenomena may share a common foundation, something psychological in nature, yet seemingly conscious. If that's true, we're not just observing random anomalies. We may be observing intent.
Doc, I'm at the site right now. There are seriously strange things happening here. Witnesses are describing glowing spheres, floating lights that transform into flying saucers. Some claim they communicate telepathically.
If these reports are accurate, then these phenomena may not be separate at all. They may be connected. We continue our investigation into anomalous events. At this stage, we are focusing on the category known as glitches in the matrix, specifically the disappearance and reappearance of objects. To analyze these phenomena and move closer to understanding these mysteries, we will use cross-analysis and a deductive analytical method based on logic. When compiling statistics from reported cases describing so-called matrix glitches, several recurring types of experiences have been identified. People most commonly report the following: dreams that predict the future or involve some form of contact, collective visions, telepathy, synchronization with media sources, disappearance and reappearance of objects, digital synchronicities, unknown natural energetic phenomena, the Mandela effect or memory alteration, temporal anomalies, spatial anomalies, precognition, phantoms, ghosts or doppelgangers, interference from higher powers. Based on the data we've gathered online, we can say with confidence that the phenomenon of objects disappearing and reappearing occurs all over the world. It has most likely happened to you as well, you just didn't pay much attention to it. If we narrow it down and focus specifically on cases where objects disappear or seem to teleport, it becomes clear that the phenomenon appears to be directed at people. It's almost as if some kind of experiment is being carried out, and the person becomes a participant, in other words, a test subject.
Yes, but in that case, what role does the person play? Are they a victim?
It doesn't seem that way. It feels more like the phenomenon is trying to disrupt the subject's worldview, to surprise them with something completely out of the ordinary, to break their usual understanding of reality.
But why? And who would need that?
That's exactly what we have to find out. At this stage, we're only at the very beginning. We still need to gather much more data. Do you have any other interesting cases related to this?
Yes, I found 4 cases that might be worth looking at. My plush, very vibrant pink headband vanished into thin air. I had it on my head to keep my face mask out of my hair. I took the headband off and placed it on the bed. When I came back from my shower, it was no longer on my bed. I tore my room apart looking for it, got my mom to come down and help me look for it. There was no sign. It literally was like it vanished. The next morning, I got up and left my room to go to the bathroom. When I came back, the headband was on the floor in front of the bed. The second thing I had happen was something appeared on my dresser. Earlier in the day, I had an iced coffee and put the cup in with the other recycling in the room across from mine. That night, I had left my room to go to the bathroom before I went to sleep, and the iced coffee cup was sitting on the corner of the dresser by the door. I also want to share only myself and my mother were in the house during both of these events, and she slept upstairs and wouldn't have been able to do this.
When I was a kid, I once left our apartment with my mom to go to my dad's workplace. I took a toy with me that shot these heavy little balls. At his work, which was about a 30-minute drive from our house, I lost one of those balls. Later, my mom and I came back home. She went to the kitchen, which is to the right of the entrance, and I went to the living room on the left. Suddenly, I felt something hit me in the back. I turned around and it was that exact same ball. There was no one in the hallway. I shouted to my mom in the kitchen, but she had no idea what I was talking about. It wasn't super creepy or anything, but I've never had an explanation for it. It couldn't have been stuck in my clothes or anything like that. It clearly flew in and hit me in the back from the hallway.
What's both fascinating and surprising is that the scientific community still hasn't seriously begun studying this phenomenon. And yet we can see that it happens quite frequently and all over the world. We can draw that conclusion from the reports people post online. There are a huge number of comments about it on social platforms.
I have a necklace from my grandmother that I like to wear for special occasions. My boyfriend at the time took me out for my birthday, and I decided to wear it. On the way home, we pulled over in a secluded area to fool around. I took my necklace off and then couldn't find it. I was devastated. Months later, my mom asked me if I knew what the necklace was hanging on the back of her door in her bedroom. It was there. Still can't figure it out.
I was working on my motorcycle in the mud, right where I had crashed while trying to do a cool drift. In the process, I broke the clutch and the gear shifter. I brought over a set of wrenches and used one of them to loosen a bolt. I loosened it a bit and put the wrench down on the ground so I could finish unscrewing the bolt by hand. About 2 minutes later, I went to pick the wrench up, and it was gone. I searched absolutely everywhere in that muddy mess, but it was pointless. Luckily, I had a spare wrench in my car. After fixing the bike, I rode home to take a shower and wash all the mud off. I walk into my room and see the wrench lying on my desk. I was completely freaked out.
People often interpret these events as glitches in the matrix. Of course, that idea has mostly turned into a meme, but it doesn't actually explain what's happening or the way this phenomenon seems to interact with people.
Yes, exactly. Objects disappear and reappear. Usually things the person knew about, was thinking about, or considered important. Or items they clearly remember and know exactly where they left them. They're certain about the location and convinced they couldn't have made a mistake. Those things should have been exactly where they expected them to be.
Yes, I remember some truly bizarre cases people told me about. For example, a CNC machinist once said that he took a heavy metal clamp, about 10 kilograms off the machine, and put it on a shelf. He turned away for a moment, and when he looked back, it was gone.
And people tend to react the same way in these situations. They say they can't believe their eyes and start thinking they might be losing their minds.
Yes, exactly. That's precisely what I meant. Or for example, one common way this phenomenon shows up is like this. One man reported that he was playing with his cat. He crumpled up a sheet of newspaper in his hands and tossed it onto the floor, but he never heard it land. The crumpled paper simply vanished in midair. He said he clearly remembers the moment. He and the cat just looked at each other in complete surprise.
Yes, I remember there were some really unbelievable cases. For example, one woman wrote that an item she had lost a year earlier suddenly reappeared while she was at a train station. She opened a luggage locker, and the item was lying right on top of her suitcase.
By the way, there's also a kind of recurring case people report. They say that when they wake up, the front door of their house or apartment is open, and the lock cylinder is sticking out.
Yes, Doc, but that's not really about objects disappearing and reappearing.
You're right. It seems we've already drifted beyond the scope of this topic. It looks like we've exhausted it. We should move on to the next one.
To wrap up this topic, what conclusions have we managed to draw?
First, the phenomenon appears to be directed at people, specifically at their reactions, at their psychological response. Second, the phenomenon seems to display a certain level of intelligence.
Can you support that conclusion?
Well, that conclusion is actually easy to make, even without digging into the full statistics of all the cases. For example, in one of the cases we mentioned, a girl's bright headband disappeared, even though she was 100% sure where she had left it. Or in another case, a cup was in the trash can and later turned up in plain sight in another room. There are also many cases where people search for a missing item for a long time, and out of desperation they address the phenomenon, either silently in their thoughts or out loud. Then the object mysteriously appears in a place they had already checked 1,000 times, or right in plain sight. Doesn't that suggest some kind of intelligence? At that point, it almost seems like there is direct interaction with the person.
What other conclusions have you come to?
Speaking more broadly, what do we have? Often a person doesn't see or sense the phenomenon directly, but many people report a feeling that someone is watching them, an irrational sense of fear, or their hair standing on end for no apparent reason.
You're mistaken, Doc. People often describe physical manifestations of the phenomenon in places where these disappearances and reappearances occur. They report strange sounds, touches, and visual effects in their peripheral vision.
All right, fair enough. I'll agree with you. But here we're moving into completely unknown territory. To understand it, we'll need to keep collecting information on each of these phenomena. So what can we say as we wrap up this video? It seems that this phenomenon may have a common underlying nature, and to understand it, we need to look at it from a broader perspective, taking into account all the related occurrences. I've already started building a logical framework. To understand it, we need to identify the connections. For example, even at the early stages of this research, we've noticed something that seems to unite almost all anomalous phenomena: the observation of glowing spheres or orbs. Broadly speaking, this may be a kind of basic form of the phenomenon, one that appears in cases involving UFOs, ghosts, poltergeists, and even Bigfoot.
It sounds like our world might be in close contact with some other world.
Yes, and when these worlds interact, the phenomenon appears.
Doc, in the next episode, let's start looking into the near-death experience phenomenon.
Good choice. The logic of the events and the statistics of the reports seem to point us in that direction. First of all, it's connected with consciousness and with the manifestation of that other world you mentioned. Could that world be the one people go to after death?
That's what the next episode will be about. Stay with us. Subscribe and tell us your thoughts and stories in the comments. This is only the beginning, and there's much more to come.